You've noticed it, haven't you? In a room where conversations slowly turn towards someone who isn't there, most people lean in. Their voices soften. Their eyes sharpen. There's a subtle thrill in dissecting someone else's life. And then there's you. You feel the shift instantly. The energy changes. Something in your chest tightens. Not because you're morally superior, not because you think you're better, but because the conversation feels destabilizing, unnecessary, almost invasive. You don't gossip, not casually, not habitually, not even when it would make you fit in. And that choice has a cost. The core conflict isn't about being nice, it's about belonging versus integrity. It's about the tension between social bonding and psychological boundaries. Gossip, at its core, is social glue. It creates alliances. It establishes shared narratives. It signals trust. I'm telling you something about them, which means I trust you. Refusing to participate can feel like refusing connection itself. So when you stay quiet, change the subject, or refuse to comment, something subtle happens. You're no longer fully inside the circle. You're adjacent, observing, sometimes tolerated, sometimes quietly labeled as distant, cold, or overly serious. And that's where the internal struggle begins, because you don't avoid gossip out of naivety. You avoid it because your mind tracks consequences. You instinctively think 3 steps ahead. If they speak this way about someone who isn't here, what do they say when I'm not here? If I contribute, what does that say about me? If I distort someone's reputation for social bonding, who am I becoming? This is not just behavior, it's identity-level cognition. People who don't gossip often have a heightened internal coherence. Their self-concept is tightly linked to consistency. There's a strong alignment between private values and public behavior. When that alignment is threatened, it creates cognitive dissonance that feels physically uncomfortable. So the first psychological mechanism at play is identity integration. Your brain is constantly scanning for congruence. If your values include fairness, privacy, or intellectual honesty, participating in rumor-based conversations creates friction. Even if everyone else treats it as harmless entertainment, your nervous system reads it as a boundary violation. Behaviorally, this looks like silence, redirecting topics, giving neutral responses, refusing to add speculation. Emotionally, it can feel isolating. Because gossip is easy, nuanced conversation is harder, and people who avoid gossip often crave depth instead of drama. They prefer ideas over individuals, systems over stories, principles over personalities. This doesn't make them more evolved. It makes them differently oriented. The second mechanism is metacognition. Most people engage in gossip reactively. They respond to emotional cues in the room. But people who avoid it often have strong meta-awareness. They observe their own thoughts while having them. They track the impulse to comment and then analyze it. Why do I want to say this? Is it accurate? Is it useful? Am I sharing information or performing social alignment? That extra layer of awareness slows them down. In fast-moving social environments, this can make them seem reserved. But internally, they are processing at a different depth. They are aware that words construct reality, that narratives shape reputations, that once spoken, interpretations can't be fully retrieved. The emotional consequence of this metacognition is over-responsibility. They often carry an exaggerated sense of moral weight. They feel accountable not only for what they do, but for what they endorse through silence or participation. And here's the paradox. The same awareness that protects their integrity can amplify their isolation. The third mechanism is sensitivity to relational security. Gossip creates unstable social structures. It relies on absence. It thrives on partial information. For individuals who crave psychological safety, this unpredictability feels threatening. They tend to prefer direct communication. If there's tension, address it. If there's confusion, clarify it. If there's a problem, solve it. Indirect commentary about someone who isn't present feels inefficient and corrosive. It erodes trust rather than builds it. So they withdraw. Not because they lack social intelligence, but because they are acutely aware of social fragility. Over time, this shapes relationship patterns. In friendships, they may become the safe person, the one others vent to, the one who doesn't spread stories, the one who can be trusted with secrets. But they rarely receive the same raw honesty in return. People sense their restraint and sometimes interpret it as emotional distance. In professional settings, this dynamic becomes even more complex. Workplaces often operate on informal information networks. Who's aligned with whom? Who's being considered for promotion? Who made a mistake? Participating in these conversations can offer strategic advantage. When you opt out, you may protect your integrity but lose access to subtle influence channels. This can create frustration. You see the politics. You understand the undercurrents. But you refuse to weaponize information, and that refusal can cost you visibility. Yet here's something important. People who don't gossip often have a long-term orientation. They value reputation stability over short-term alliance. They understand that trust compounds slowly and collapses quickly. They are playing a different game. But psychologically, this can come with self-doubt. You may wonder if you're too rigid, too serious, too principled for your own good. You might question whether your restraint is wisdom or fear of judgment. This is where social comparison theory enters. When you observe others bonding easily through shared commentary, you might interpret your difference as deficiency. They seem relaxed. You feel hyper-aware. They seem included. You feel peripheral. But comparison ignores internal experience. For many people, gossip is low-stakes entertainment. For you, it activates ethical evaluation, identity coherence, and future consequence mapping simultaneously. Your brain is running multiple layers of analysis that others may not even register. That doesn't mean you're better. It means your cognitive load is heavier, and heavy cognition can look like emotional intensity. There's also an overlooked component. People who avoid gossip often struggle with labeling. They resist reducing complex individuals into simplified narratives. When someone says, "She's manipulative," your mind immediately searches for context. What behavior? Under what conditions? Compared to what baseline? You hesitate to agree because categorical judgments feel intellectually dishonest. This trait is deeply connected to integrative complexity, the ability to hold multiple perspectives at once. It's associated with nuanced thinking, but socially, it can create friction. Rooms often reward clarity over complexity, certainty over nuance, so your silence can be misread as ambiguity. Or worse, disloyalty. Emotionally, this creates tension. You don't want to invalidate others' experiences, but you also refuse to collapse a human being into a headline. That internal negotiation is exhausting. Now consider how this affects self-esteem. When belonging repeatedly conflicts with integrity, you are forced to choose. If you choose belonging, you feel inauthentic. If you choose integrity, you risk exclusion. Repeated exposure to this tension can create chronic hypervigilance in social settings. You enter conversations scanning for shifts. You calculate when topics might turn personal. You prepare neutral responses in advance. This isn't social anxiety in the traditional sense. It's value-protective awareness. But over time, it can feel like fatigue. Decision-making also shifts. You may gravitate towards smaller social circles, fewer people, deeper trust. You might avoid environments where drama is normalized. You prefer relationships built on shared curiosity, not shared criticism. Some interpret this as introversion, but it's not about energy depletion alone. It's about psychological preference for stability over stimulation. There's also a moral humility embedded here. People who don't gossip often have a strong awareness of their own flaws. They know how easy it is to be misinterpreted. They understand how a single mistake can be exaggerated through repetition. So they extend that grace outward. They don't dissect others because they know they would not want to be dissected. This empathy is rarely visible. It operates quietly, but it shapes behavior powerfully. However, without reflection, this pattern can tip into rigidity. Absolute refusal to engage in any evaluative discussion can create emotional suppression. Not all negative talk is gossip. Sometimes it's processing harm. Sometimes it's seeking support. The key distinction is intention. Are you sharing to clarify reality and seek resolution? Or to elevate yourself through comparison? When others bond through narratives you refuse to tell, it can feel like watching a train you chose not to board. You stand on the platform, aware of your decision, yet wondering what connection you forfeited. The quiet realization is this: you are not socially deficient. You are selectively participatory. So the real work isn't about becoming more talkative or more silent. It's about building relationships where depth replaces drama, where curiosity replaces commentary, where honesty replaces insinuation. Those environments exist. They're just quieter. And when you find them, you'll notice something subtle. Conversation feels lighter, not because it's shallow, but because it's clean.